Hello, Psych 9 students and psychology students. Professor Zeeb here. And today I'm going to teach you about Erikson's next stage, the one that's very appropriate for middle to late childhood and elementary school years, which of course is industry versus inferiority. And roughly this happens around, ages 5 to 12 approximately, but once again, middle to late childhood. I really think our textbook does a horrible job of explaining this one. So I want to give you more detail, more explanation, and some of my more personal insight into what the stage actually is all about and what Erikson was sort of trying to communicate to people through this one. All right, so let's go to our slides here and then we'll kind of explain it. Okay, so once again, the stage we're going to focus on is industry versus inferiority. You have to realize we really think that self-esteem just takes off during this period. So kids, as they're being around other children and they're in school being graded and evaluated, we really think the self-esteem stuff just really takes off and is forming incredibly. So let's kind of look at this. So if you remember with Erikson, it's always, sort of a positive outcome of a crisis. This is kind of what we would expect. Industry and this inferiority, unfortunately, is the negative counterpoint to that, if you would. So it turns out industry, we'll start there, is really important to having productive relationships later on. So we're going to see, once again, this is laying down the foundation for future relationships, and we'll kind of build on that as we go. Our book sort of mentions that industry, coming from the word industrious, means to be productive and to get things done. Children have this natural curiosity to do things and to figure out how things work and that kind of thing. But to me, there's a deeper meaning here, something that needs to be elaborated on and explained further. So to me, industry is sort of the feeling that you have what it takes to succeed. You're able not only to get things done, but you can get things done well. So for example, this is a child who believes that they have strengths and abilities. In other words, they know that I'm good at certain things and I can excel. This is a child that has had success in their life, whether it's in school, with their friends, et cetera, knowing that you've had accomplishments and you're able to be successful. In other words, it kind of translates, and we're really going to build on this as we go through the course, is having a sense of competence, believing in your abilities. It's very related to self-esteem once again. So thus, if you believe that, then you can get the things done that you desire to do, which is important to being industrious. So some examples, once again, are having friends, knowing that you're liked by people, knowing that you're good in certain areas in school, whether it be math or art or whatever it is. That's kind of the stuff we mean. So not only knowing that, but getting it done and willing to try and so forth, and to be industrious, as Erikson would say. So inferiority, the counterpart here, is kind of like having the feelings that you don't have the talent to succeed, or you don't have the skills, you don't believe in your abilities, or what we call self-efficacy, basically. So this is a child who's had successive failures. They don't feel good about themselves. There's no competence. They may not even want to try, for example. In other words, when they compare themselves to other children of similar age in this particular case, they feel inferior to other people because they don't have what it takes. There's nothing good about them, or they don't have good qualities in terms of who they are as a person. Remember, as children get to school, and certainly this could happen in preschool and so forth, children really begin to compare themselves with other kids. Remember, we call this socialization, or social comparison, excuse me. So we call this social comparison, where starting roughly around age 4, children begin to socially compare themselves to others. And that's one of the ways we've discovered that they learn about themselves. By comparing themselves to others, they learn that they're better than other kids at certain things, or worse, or even at the same level. So it kind of gives us a rudimentary sense of the self during this time. So through these comparisons, these social comparisons, children learn their own and others' unique capacities and start to develop competence, and thus a sense of achievement. So that's once again really related to this particular stage. And we think that there's certain things that contribute to this, not only their social life, but parents and their experiences in school with their teachers, for example, we know can contribute to these feelings, okay? So research has basically shown that inferiority, remember, feeling that you don't have any ability or strengths and you can't get things done, you're discouraged from doing so, is kind of what we mean by that. Inferiority can develop when several things are sort of in place. Number one, the child has consistent failures or disappointments in their life. In other words, when it comes to this particular child and we look at their life, it is fail, fail, fail. So across the board, they're failing at school, they don't have friends, they're not good at sports or whatever it is. There seems to be a consistent factor when they compare themselves to others that they're falling short and they're not getting success, if that makes sort of sense. Number two, when parents do not prepare their children for school life, we think that this could set them up for the feelings of inferiority. Obviously, when kids get to school, they are constantly being evaluated by their teachers, right? They receive marks, they receive grades on their assignments, they get feedback from the teacher and so forth. So that's pretty rough for a young, vulnerable child to be judged on certain abilities which they may not have or even have tried before, depending on their scenario, of course, and the circumstances. This may sort of pave the way for the feelings of inferiority. In other words, if the parents don't prepare the child psychologically, emotionally for the rigors of the educational environment, and they get to school and they're failing spelling tests and they're not accomplishing these, the outcomes, and they're falling short, this may be a rude awakening to that child that, wow, I don't have what it takes. I feel horrible about myself because I can't succeed. So it's really important for parents to sort of have a talk with their children that, yeah, when you get to school, you're going to be evaluated. And you can't always expect to be perfect. You're going to get some bad grades. And when that happens, it's okay. I still love you. And I'm going to work with you and I'm going to help you get past this. In other words, you can succeed and I'm going to try my best to help you. So once again, kids kind of need that heads up, if you would, when it comes to going to school, because obviously they're going to be judged in several ways with that. We've also found that kids who have a lot of negative experiences with their teachers are more prone to feeling inferior. And that kind of makes sense. If there's a teacher that doesn't like them and is persistently giving them bad grades or negative feedback on assignments, we think that trickles down to their feelings, where they may feel inferior and they don't feel like they have enough ability to succeed in school, and thus I'm a less competent person as a result of that. So once again, very important for parents to prepare their kids for the successes and failures of school life, because it's not always going to be straight A's for kids in many circumstances, okay? So hopefully that's helped you to kind of understand the stage a little bit better, because like I said, the textbook just really gives a superficial description of what that is. So as always, guys, if you ever have questions on any of our concepts, just please email me. I'm here to help you. I hope you're enjoying the class, and we will see you online.